Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The training room was packed that night, thick with the smell of sweat and the thud of boxing gloves hitting the bags. The walls were plastered with yellowed posters of local champions, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. Everyone knew that Marcus, the most feared fighter in town, trained here every night. Tall, muscular, and with an ego to match his size, he inspired both fear and admiration. That evening, something, or rather someone, caught his attention. A slender, almost frail woman stood in a corner, watching intently. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, her brown eyes fixed on every movement with intensity. At first glance, she seemed insignificant. But there was a silent determination in her gaze that unsettled Marcus without him knowing why. "What would a little woman like you possibly want to do here?" Marcus sneered, his voice filling the room. The audience burst into laughter, sharing his amusement. The woman didn't move. She didn't tremble. She said nothing. Her composure contrasted sharply with Marcus's arrogance, making her all the more intriguing. Murmurs began to circulate among the spectators. "She's not scary at all. Do you think she's going to fight?" The woman remained motionless, but a slight smile appeared on her lips, almost imperceptible, as if she knew something that no one else could guess. Marcus stepped forward, preparing to humiliate her in front of everyone. He wanted to prove that no one, and especially not a woman so small, could stand up to him. But what he didn't know was that this woman wasn't just ordinary. She had spent years mastering techniques that few fighters could understand, and that night, she was ready to show that strength isn't always in muscles, but in precision, composure, and spirit. Tension rose in the room. Every spectator held their breath. Marcus thought he was going to have fun ridiculing this woman. The small woman, however, already knew how to overthrow the arrogant giant. The room was still filled with the hubbub of the spectators, all eyes fixed on Marcus. He stood in the center of the improvised ring, chest puffed out, ready to mock the small woman who stood a few meters away. "So tell me," he said with a mocking smile, "you really think you can beat me?" Laughter erupted in the room. Some spectators shook their heads in doubt, others murmured amongst themselves, amused. The woman, Lisa, remained motionless, her gaze fixed and her composure almost irritating. "Do you see what I'm looking at?" Marcus continued, stepping closer to her. "Even your smile is pathetic." But Lisa didn't answer. She took a deep breath, as if to gather a silent energy that no one had noticed until now. Her body, though slender, seemed ready to spring at any moment. One spectator dared to shout, "Come on, Lisa. Show us what you can do." The challenge was issued. Lisa nodded slightly, without a word, and took a step forward. Every movement she made was fluid and precise, betraying a mastery that no one suspected. Marcus sneered and made an exaggerated gesture, as if to provoke her further. "You really think you can take me on, little guy?" He advanced quickly, thinking it would be easy. But before he could even touch Lisa, she dodged with surprising speed, her graceful movements defying gravity. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room. Then, in an instant, she grabbed Marcus's arm, used her momentum against him, and threw him to the ground with incredible precision. The impact was so powerful that the room fell silent for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. Marcus, dazed and stunned, barely managed to get to his feet, his eyes wide, unable to hide his surprise and shame. Lisa stood straight and calm, her gaze filled with quiet determination. She wasn't smiling, but a faint glimmer of satisfaction shone in her eyes. The small woman everyone had underestimated had just proven that she wasn't just capable of defending herself, she could effortlessly overpower arrogant people. The spectators then began to applaud, at first timidly, then louder and louder, chanting his name. Marcus, for his part, realized that this fight would not only be a physical affront, but a blow to his ego. Marcus was stunned, but his pride refused to let him admit defeat. He rose slowly, his eyes flashing. The crowd, excited by the unexpected outcome, held its breath. No one had ever seen Marcus like this, surprised, thrown off balance, facing an opponent he considered insignificant. It was just a stroke of luck, he grumbled, clenching his fists. It won't happen again. Lisa, calm and composed, took a step towards him, her movements measured, almost dance-like. She showed neither fear nor anger. Her only weapon seemed to be her perfect mastery of the art of combat. Marcus launched a swift attack, a punch meant to intimidate. But Lisa dodged once again, her movements precise and rapid. In an instant, she grabbed his arm and twisted it, completely throwing him off balance. Marcus staggered, surprised once more. The crowd erupted in murmurs. How does she do that? She's incredible. The spectators were beginning to understand that this was not simply a confrontation between a strong man and a fragile woman. Lisa possessed a past that no one had imagined, years of intensive martial arts training, a silent discipline that transformed every movement into a formidable weapon. Marcus tried a new, more aggressive approach, hoping to overwhelm Lisa with his brute strength. But she anticipated his every move, using her weight and speed against him. Every attack he made backfired, every step he took brought him closer to the ground. At that precise moment, some spectators rose to their feet, applauding Lisa with admiration. Even the most skeptical could not deny the obvious, she was in total control. Marcus began to feel panic creeping into him, a feeling he had never known before. And as he attempted one last move, Lisa perfectly executed a perfect throw, bringing him to his knees, completely dominated. A hush fell over the room for a few seconds before applause and cries of admiration erupted, filling the air with electrifying energy. Marcus, the arrogant fighter, finally understood that tonight he was not only being challenged physically, he was facing a lesson in humility and self-control that he had never imagined. Marcus, red with anger and humiliation, tried to get to his feet, his hands trembling. Every spectator could see that his ego had just suffered a brutal blow. The entire room held its breath, fascinated by the scene unfolding before them. "It's not possible," Marcus murmured, unable to hide his disbelief. He had underestimated Lisa and was paying the price for his arrogance. Lisa, for her part, advanced slowly towards him, each step imbued with confidence and composure. She didn't look at him with hatred or vengeance, but with a quiet, almost teacherly determination. She knew that the moment of humiliation was as much a lesson for Marcus as it was for all the spectators. Marcus made a defensive move, but Lisa used her speed and precision to intercept him. In one fluid motion, she sent him sprawling to the ground again, this time with a small sweep that left him sitting up, completely overwhelmed. The spectators erupted in laughter and admiration. "Who would have thought that such a small woman could knock Marcus over?" someone in the crowd murmured. Others nodded, impressed by Lisa's perfect technique. Marcus, publicly humiliated, tried to resume his arrogant words, but his sentences remained unfinished, interrupted by his own confusion. He had never faced an opponent capable of anticipating his every move and turning her strength against him. Lisa stood straight and motionless, dominating the scene with her mere presence. She didn't laugh, she didn't mock. Her power lay not in brute force, but in precision, calm, and the total control of every gesture. Marcus was acutely aware that his defeat was not only physical, but symbolic, the arrogance of a giant overturned by the silent mastery of a woman. As the crowd continued to applaud and chant her name, Lisa slowly turned her back on Marcus, leaving behind a lesson no one would ever forget: never underestimate anyone, no matter how they look. Marcus, still red with anger, stood up, clenching his fists. His ego was deeply bruised, and he refused to admit that Lisa had completely overpowered him. "This isn't over," he growled, ready to use all his strength to regain control. He launched himself into a series of rapid attacks, striking the air around Lisa in a desperate attempt to intimidate or knock her down. But Lisa, calm as ever, dodged each move with disconcerting fluidity. Her movements seemed almost to predict Marcus's intentions. At one point, he attempted a powerful roundhouse kick, thinking his size and strength would be enough to knock her over. Lisa caught his foot mid-motion and, seemingly effortlessly, used Marcus's momentum to send him sprawling back to the floor. The room erupted in cheers and applause, the astonishment on every face was palpable. Marcus, panting and frustrated, then attempted a more complex move, combining strength and strategy. But Lisa perfectly anticipated his every move. She moved with surgical precision, turning Marcus's aggression into a complete disadvantage. Each attempt at a counterattack brought him closer to public humiliation. Incredible. Someone murmured in the crowd. She really reads his every move. Marcus finally understood that this wasn't a normal fight. Lisa wasn't simply fast or strong, she possessed a mastery of body and mind that surpassed anything he had ever faced. Every attack he launched was turned against him with terrifying elegance. At the end of the scene, Marcus was on his knees, breathing heavily, unable to continue. Lisa, motionless and serene, watched him calmly. She had not only won the physical fight, she had won the victory over pride and arrogance. The cheering crowd understood that tonight, Marcus hadn't just been beaten, he had been taught a lesson by someone he had deemed too weak to be an opponent. Lisa had just transformed a mockery into a demonstration of silent and irresistible power. The silence in the room gave way to a collective murmur. Everyone wanted to understand how such a frail woman could dominate Marcus, the most feared fighter in the city. The spectators exchanged astonished glances, some whispering, "She must have a secret past." Lisa, ever calm, lightly wiped the sweat from her brow and took a deep breath. She had never sought fame, and yet tonight, she had just demonstrated the full extent of her talent. Her gaze was fixed on Marcus, who was slowly rising, his features etched with humiliation. A spectator approached and whispered to her neighbor, "She was a judo champion, a few years ago." Nobody knew. The spectators were stunned. This revelation finally made sense of what they had just seen. Every movement of Lisa was calculated, every dodge, every throw, demonstrated years of training and discipline. Marcus, meanwhile, felt his arrogance melt away. What he had mistaken for fragility was in reality a perfect camouflage to conceal an exceptional talent. He was facing not just an opponent, but a force he had never even considered. Lisa stepped forward again, this time to show that she had no intention of hurting anyone. She wasn't seeking revenge or a gratuitous display of strength. Her precise and controlled gait was a silent lesson in respect, self-control, and hidden power. Marcus lowered his head slightly, unable to reply. He had just learned, through his own defeat, that strength was not always visible and that size or gender had nothing to do with courage or competence. The applause in the hall intensified. Lisa hadn't just won a battle, she had won everyone's admiration and respect, including Marcus's. The lesson was clear for everyone: never, ever underestimate someone who appears fragile. That night, Lisa's reputation began to spread. The small woman who seemed insignificant was in reality a champion capable of defeating any opponent, including the most arrogant of fighters. Marcus, still panting and red with frustration, straightened up once more. His pride was suffering more than his muscles. He had never faced an opponent capable of anticipating his every move. The fascinated crowd held its breath. Marcus knew he had to try something to salvage some of his pride, but he didn't yet know he was walking straight into Lisa's trap. "Do you think you can continue like this?" he said in a forced tone, trying to regain his arrogance. Lisa, impassive, watched him calmly. Her body seemed light yet implacable, each movement calculated with perfect precision. She didn't need to shout or strike violently, her mere control was enough to manage the situation. Marcus attacked again, more aggressive, combining strength and speed. But Lisa anticipated his movements perfectly. With a fluid motion, she deflected his arm, pivoted it, and then used Marcus's momentum to throw him to the ground with a swift, precise movement. This time, he fell on his back, unable to get up immediately. The spectators erupted in applause and cries of astonishment. The arrogant giant was on the ground, and the small woman, calm and serene, remained standing, almost motionless, commanding by her mere presence. Marcus blinked, unable to comprehend how he could have been so utterly outmaneuvered by someone he considered his inferior. A spectator whispered, "This is more than a fight, it's a demonstration of absolute control." Marcus felt a pang of shame wash over him. His ego, built on years of victories and intimidation, had just been completely shattered by Lisa's quiet strength. He hadn't just lost physically, he had lost symbolically, in front of all those who had dared to challenge him. Lisa took a step back and crossed her arms, her calm, upright posture reflecting power and control. She wasn't smiling, but her gaze betrayed a slight satisfaction. She had transformed a moment of mockery and defiance into a brilliant demonstration. True strength isn't measured by size, gender, or brutality, but by mastery, technique, and self-confidence. Marcus, breathless and stunned, finally realized the truth. He had just learned a lesson no one could forget. Tonight, the small woman had not only overpowered the fighter, but she had also shattered his arrogance and self-assurance. Marcus was on his knees, breathless, his face marked by surprise and humiliation. He had always believed that his strength and size would be enough to impress and dominate, but Lisa had just shown him that arrogance could be overturned by control and calm. The crowd, in a frenzy, applauded and chanted Lisa's name. Some were on their feet, cheering every precise movement she made. The small woman had transformed what could have been mere mockery into a true lesson in respect and humility. Lisa approached Marcus slowly, without any animosity. She extended her hand with quiet confidence, an invitation to acknowledge not only his defeat, but also the value of mutual respect. Marcus hesitated, his gaze fixed on the outstretched hand. His pride battled his conscience, but he finally understood that refusing the gesture would only prolong the humiliation. With a sigh, he took Lisa's hand, and the audience greeted the gesture with enthusiastic applause. You're incredible," he murmured, still on his knees, his voice full of respect. Lisa gave a slight smile and calmly replied, "Strength isn't measured by appearance, Marcus. You have to respect your opponents and remain humble." At that moment, Marcus understood that this fight had been much more than a physical confrontation. He had been taught, through pain and humiliation, that true power resides as much in the heart and mind as in the muscles. The crowd began to talk about Lisa with admiration. Her composure, her technique, and her ability to dominate a renowned opponent made her a role model. Marcus, for his part, slowly rose, this time without arrogance, and silently accepted that respect was now due to Lisa. This scene marked a turning point. It was no longer simply a woman's fight against an arrogant man, but a story of victory over prejudice, pride, and appearances. The small, unassuming yet formidable woman had now earned everyone's respect, and Marcus would never forget her. The days following the fight were filled with whispers and discussions throughout the city. In training halls, on the streets, and even in cafes, Lisa's name was constantly on everyone's lips. People were no longer just talking about Marcus and his arrogance, but especially about the small woman who had defeated him with such mastery that no one could have imagined it. Marcus, on the other hand, struggled to regain his former confidence. His ego had been deeply shaken, and he now realized how much he had underestimated others. Every training session became a humbling experience. He began to observe the techniques of others, listen to their advice, and recognize the value of talents he would once have scorned. Lisa, for her part, wasn't seeking glory. She continued her training, disciplined and focused, but her example was now inspiring young girls and boys in the gym. Many came simply to see her, to learn from her composure and calm in the face of adversity. One afternoon, Marcus found her in the room, this time not to fight, but to learn. "Lisa, I want to understand. Show me how you do it," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and shame. Lisa nodded with a kind smile. "It's not just about physical strength, Marcus. It's about discipline, focus, and self-control. If you want to improve, you have to learn about yourself before you try to beat others." Thus began a new chapter for Marcus. What he had believed to be a humiliating affront transformed into an opportunity for growth. Thanks to Lisa, he understood that humility was not a weakness, but a strength. The spectators and other fighters who had followed the story began to see Marcus differently. His transformation, inspired by the little woman he had once underestimated, became an example. One could always change and learn, even after being humiliated. Lisa, for her part, remained true to herself, discreet, focused, but now recognized as a real force, capable of overcoming the most arrogant and inspiring respect throughout the city. After the famous fight, Lisa's name was now circulating throughout the city and beyond. People were talking about this small woman who had defeated Marcus, the arrogant fighter, with perfect control. In the training halls, young people came not only to learn judo or martial arts, but also to observe Lisa and understand her philosophy of strength and respect. The local media began to take an interest in her. One article was titled, "The Woman Who Knocked Over the Giant, the Story of Lisa." It made the rounds of the newspapers. The interviews revealed a humble person, who refused to boast and insisted that true strength lay in discipline and self-control. Marcus, for his part, had changed. He was now attentive to others, respectful of every opponent, and his misplaced pride had given way to a genuine desire to learn. He continued to train alongside Lisa, taking notes, observing every movement, aware that his past arrogance had almost destroyed his reputation. In the streets, young girls and boys were inspired by Lisa. Some began to enroll in martial arts clubs to develop not only their physical strength, but also their patience and emotional control. Lisa hadn't just won a fight, she had sown a seed of courage and perseverance in an entire generation. One day, during a public demonstration, Lisa again showed her techniques, explaining the movements, the strategies, and the importance of remaining calm in the face of adversity. Marcus, at her side, no longer hid his admiration and actively participated, having become an example of transformation thanks to the lesson he had received. The city had grasped one essential truth: strength wasn't measured solely by muscles or size, but by self-control, courage, and the ability to inspire others. Lisa had become a living legend, not through arrogance, but through excellence, discipline, and integrity. This chapter of her life marked a turning point. From simple spectator to local heroine, Lisa had proven that true power is not seen on the outside, but is felt in the determination, control, and respect that one imposes without raising one's voice. In the weeks that followed, Lisa became a true icon in the city. Her feat against Marcus was no longer just a spectacular memory, but a symbol of courage, discipline, and self-control. Training halls filled with young people who came not only to learn how to fight, but also to understand the philosophy she embodied: respect, patience, and humility. Marcus, transformed, continued to train alongside her. Once arrogant and domineering, he was now attentive, humble, and eager to learn. He shared his experience with the others, recounting how he had underestimated Lisa and how she had forced him to reconsider his view of strength. His example showed that even the proudest could change, provided they remained open to learning and humility. Lisa, discreet yet radiant, never sought the limelight. Yet every movement she made, every demonstration she gave, captivated and inspired. Children, teenagers, and even adults came to see her, fascinated by her composure and calm. She taught that true power was not measured by brute force, but by self-control, strategy, and quiet confidence. One day, during a large public demonstration, Lisa faced a new opponent, a promising young fighter. With patience and precision, she showed how to use an opponent's strength against them, how to remain calm under pressure, and how to win not through arrogance, but through intelligence and technique. Marcus, at her side, guided the spectators and students, transformed by the lesson he had received from Lisa. At the end of the demonstration, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Lisa smiled slightly, modestly, while Marcus, now humble, stood gratefully beside her. The small woman who had been mocked at the beginning of the story had not only defeated an arrogant fighter, but she had also inspired an entire community to strive for self-control, respect, and perseverance. That day, it became clear to everyone that true power lay not in size, strength, or arrogance, but in courage, discipline, and the ability to inspire others. Lisa was no longer just a champion, she had become a living legend, a model of what it means to be truly strong. And in this city, from now on, no one would ever dare to underestimate anyone, regardless of their size or appearance.